Okay, welcome to Chapter 14, Information Security and Infrastructure Protection, sometimes called Information Assurance, which is different than information security. There are slight differences. There's a greater emphasis on people when we're talking about information security and infrastructure protection over systems and technologies. And we're going to get into all. All right, so we're going to understand the concept of risk as applied to information, discuss the major principles of risk analysis, identify and define the primary security technologies used to protect information. We're going to discuss a couple of various functions of firewalls. We're going to define encryption, and we're going to identify and explain some of the security vendor technologies used today to secure your information. All right, so risk analysis will always be more of an art form than a science. It all depends on the organization you work for. You're not going to know everything about everything. There's always going to be risks. There's always going to be new threats as new technologies come out. The best you're going to be able to do is try to stay current and try to let your organization know of risks as they come up. You're going to be looking at the forecast. You're going to be looking at how you can use your budgets to adopt and address issues that you see as a possibility. It says at the bottom here that management strategy should not interfere with the mission of the company. If you create such stringent rules in your management of IT that people can't do their jobs, then you need to expect people to go around you, or they're going to get rid of you. One of the two is going to happen because the company has to do their work, and you have to be a part of that work process. So there are going to be times where security will butt up against the inevitable outcome of the company, but the inevitable outcome of the company is what generates revenue. So you're going to have to come up with maybe creative ways of applying new management rules and tasks. In the earliest days of computers, we had, going back to when I first started in computers, you had a mainframe computer, you had a client, you connected to the mainframe, the computer. The dumb terminal had no processing capability really whatsoever. Everything was done from the mainframe, and the dumb terminal was basically your access into the mainframe. As the capacity of hardware increased, processing speeds increased because processing speeds of the day were extremely slow. Capacity of your hardware was a floppy disk, cassette tape. I remember pressing record and play on my TRS-80 and recording my programs onto cassette tapes and storing my cassette tapes because that's where my programs were. To go from that to today, where I don't need a storage medium because everything I do basically is mesh enabled and on the web, is a completely different way of producing. Now, some people say, well, we've just gone full circle and now we're back to client server technology. And in a lot of ways we are, except we don't have dumb terminals anymore. We have smart terminals and smart networking tools to work with. And there was no security back in the day. If you had a screensaver with a password, you were an uber security person, but nobody thought about risk at that time. Computers were just another calculator or a tool in the office, and the threat of someone breaking into that was far and few between. We didn't properly maintain computers. We didn't do backups. I don't even know how many times computers have died, and I've gone, man, if I had only had a backup, because backups were so hard to do back then. You had to have, for a good backup, I'd have 30 floppy disks, and you put one floppy disk into another, and you would get this backup file. Nobody had time for that. So you took a risk. A lot of people had jazz drives, and those failed routinely on the backups. Then we went to CDs, and they routinely failed. Now we have much more resilient backup strategies. You don't have to be at your computer. You can schedule a computer to back up in its off time. Before, you had to sit at the computer and actually make it go through. Malicious intent occurred was from mostly from the insider, because nobody could get in from the outside because there was no outside to get in from. So if you had something go wrong on the computer, your eyes went immediately to the inside, and you were looking for the person that put the code on that system. And there were a lot of know-it-alls, but very few people that went to training, very few people that really understood computers. Um, the people that read the manuals really were the kings of the kingdom. So, taking the time to sit down and read through the manuals and understand how things worked set us apart. People like myself and others set us apart from the normal user pool, because we understood how things connected and how things worked. And we learned the back-end processing, which gave us a much greater understanding of how computers actually worked. In the 70s, intruders sought knowledge and resources to hack, but these were from the mainframes. These are the phone switches. These were the large computers. Nobody was hacking personal computers, because personal computers didn't really exist yet. You didn't have access to a computer in your house. You didn't, unless you were some extremely rich person, and then you had a stock market ticker, or you had something like that. We didn't have recreational computers. Computers were seen for business and business alone back in the day. So, telling someone they're going to play games on a computer was just kind of crazy. I remember the first time I saw a chess program on a computer, and I went, "Wow, you can do chess on these things? That's crazy. That's awesome that you can do that. But why would you want to play games when we have things we can do with it?" But there was a whole gaming community that was building out of this, and people were starting to look at the computer and say, "Wow, we can connect and communicate." Social media. So we started moving up. So the 70s, 80s, and 90s saw this huge swing towards the computer, and us integrating the computers into our topology. Intruders sought more access into systems, and they started at the corporate, because that's where everything was at the corporate level. And then as things moved away from the corporate and they moved into the personal arena, you saw more people getting hacked in the personal arena. There were no laws that governed computers and computer criminals. They just weren't. There was, if you tried to find a rule or a law in, for example, the Missouri Code, if you went back into the 70s and 80s and even the 90s and looked for something to do with network intrusion or computer intrusion, you would spend all day looking for something to charge that person with. So the people in the 70s, 80s, and 90s were basically told, "Don't worry about it. It's a civil case. Hire a lawyer and sue that person." And the civil litigation was where everything really was occurring. Criminal investigations really hadn't taken off in this arena yet. Unless you were hacking IBM and you were taking massive amounts of data from IBM, it wasn't going there. You got to remember where storage came from. You got to remember where computers came from. Computers came from the insurance industry. We had huge insurance computers that stored documents. Those documents were on cards, and binary cards were spit out by these computers, and then those cards were filed in these massive warehouses. And the insurance industry went to IBM and said, "Here's the deal. You either come up with a better way for us to manage the storage of the data, or we're going back to our older systems, which didn't require as much data storage as your systems require." And Control Data, IBM, Amdahl, Memorex, all these companies saw the light and said, "You know what? We'll create a storage mechanism." And IBM came up with a storage mechanism called the floppy disk. And the floppy disk was a way of storing documents, so you didn't have to have massive warehouses. But you still had to have some physical place to put these floppy disks. So again, as the industries grew, the industries are who have been pushing the changes in storage and speed. And then we got into video, and video changed the world because video took a lot of resources. And it's funny in a way, but it's really true, is the porn industry, pornography, is what really pushed the development of high-end video transfer, because there was a lot of money to be made in the ability to transfer large video files. So a lot of the progression in the video industry came from pornography sites and the desire to capture those monies. And the whole time this is going on and this push from the industry, you have the hackers that are also coming in saying, we want it for free. So you had script kiddies and you had other people that were learning to run code without really understanding what they did. And those script kiddies eventually got bored being a script kiddie, and they said, you know what? I need something. I need to understand what I'm doing. And they started basically professionalizing themselves, becoming legitimate hackers, which increased the availability of the hacker tools and the data. Risk analysis. It's performed at just about every level in many degrees of detail. It all depends on what it is you're trying to secure. If you are in charge of a library, for example, you may have much more intellectual property risk than if you're a financial network. You may have the same types of data, but you may have a different methodology of accessing the data. So protecting intellectual property in books where people can read them online, as opposed to grabbing data off the wire, which is financial in nature, are two different mechanisms. Even though the data itself is the same, the process or the view of the data is different. So the tools to see that data is different. So your risk is different, and you have different tools or management tools to prevent access or unauthorized access, where you can still allow the business process to go. Remember, risk analysis is all about people, process, and technology. Those are really the three key foundations to this whole thing. And there is no single solution to security. A lot of people say it's all about the firewall, it's all about protecting, and they forget about the inside, or the inside is really your greatest threat. And then some people say, nope, we're just going to focus on the inside. They forget about the outside, and then all of a sudden they get attacked from the outside. So it's a balancing act between the inside and the outside. You also have to bring in the corporate responsibilities, the corporate processes, things that the company needs to do to conduct business. And that has to be filtered into that risk assessment. And then you have to filter in the access of people into that arena, and you have to, so you have all these different factors. Environmental. Are you going to have a tornado, hurricane, something going to destroy your warehouse where your servers are? Is your servers, are they in a place that does not have a lot of that kind of stuff? People go, why are they building server farms in the middle of the desert in Arizona? Because nothing ever happens in the middle of the desert in Arizona. There's very few tornadoes, if any. You don't have hurricanes. You may have significant rain, but you can manage that with troughs and other things that lead the water away. So building it in a place like Arizona really makes a lot of sense because the danger from environmental is a lot less. Also, getting to the place is difficult. So now we have our security, our actual physical security, or physical security in a place that is isolated becomes a lot easier than a place that's heavily populated. So you have environmental, you have physical security, you have people security, and then you have the technology security, the access or the ability to connect to your systems. And then you have process security. How are you protecting the processes that make your company money? And how do you prevent access from the outside world but not take away the ability for the company to make money? The first step of a risk analysis is to really sit down and understand your organization, is to sit down with all your department heads and say, hey, what are we doing? What's working and what's not working? And how do we make things better for you? And then you listen and you get feedback, and it's a constant feedback loop. Risk assessment is all about the feedback loop, all about listening to the customer tell you what they need so that you can develop a strategic plan that's going to make sense for that company. You want to have people come in from the outside. You definitely want to have your IT plan reviewed by an outsider that can look at it and say, yeah, a trusted outsider. And don't put it on the web and say, hey, what do you guys think? Because you're probably going to get hacked. But you want to have it looked at by someone from the industry on the outside that knows what they're talking about and who can give you some really solid guidance in what to do with your system. Threats. The second important risk step in that analysis is once you understand the company, once you understand everything that's going on, then you need to build in the threat matrix, the threat vector. Where are your threats coming from? Is it corporate espionage? Is it cyber terrorism? Are you a national infrastructure asset? What is it and where is it going to be coming from? Okay, who's attacking you? How are you guarding against these natural disasters that we talked about before? How are you preventing people from walking into your company and stealing your information and things such as that? And then your threats to information. How do you keep the integrity, the authenticity, the confidentiality, really important, and availability of the data that needs to be allowed on the web? So are you collecting social security numbers on your network when there's no need to have social security numbers on your network? Do you have credit card numbers in storage in an unencrypted form? These are things you need to look at. Do we need to maintain credit card numbers? Is there a purpose for that? Or is it just good data to have and we just have always collected it because? Dates of birth or any of the PPI information, that personal protected information, any of that stuff that we store on the network has to be guarded. So you have to have confidentiality and authenticity of that data, and that data has to have integrity. You have to maintain that stuff, because those are all threats to your network. If I am collecting a lot of personal protected information, you're creating a scenario where people will try to steal that from you. So you're creating your own threat, especially if you don't need that information on that network. You have to have cost-effective security. So the concept of risk management acknowledges that there's definitely a balance between having the most expensive firewalls and people and what the company can afford. There may be a time where you may not have all the resources, and you're going to have to be more creative with your management and your policies and other things to keep your company safe. There may be times where you won't get that firewall that you want, the best firewall on the network or in the world. You may get a significantly reduced cost one, or the one you order isn't bought by the purchasing department and you get the wrong one. You have to look at that and you have to say, what's going to be the cost effective to security? What is a good policy for ingesting people into the building or onto the network? How do I allow that process of people coming into my building without causing so much of a hassle that, one, people don't want to come to work, two, we have so many guards on payroll we can't afford it, and three, the management gets mad and they fire me. So you have to take all of that into consideration. If you want your policies to work, you have to really look at what is the most efficient manner of effective security. It's not always cost, it's efficiency as well. If you make things too complicated, people will not do it. They will rebel against you and they'll do their own things, causing you more risk. Security technologies. So when you're doing your risk assessment, you're going to come across many different vendors, and they're all going to tell you our solution is the best solution since sliced bread. You got to buy this firewall. If you don't have this firewall, you're just toast. You need to do research. You have to understand how your technology is going to prevent harm on the network. You need to understand the things that you use for storage. Because again, think about it. Storage is everything that your company is about. Your intellectual property, all your financial records are on storage. So you have to look at storage. Don't worry about what's on the storage. You have to look at what is your storage policy, your storage mechanism, your storage concept. What is the plan to store data? What does your mesh environment look like? Your mesh network. How do you integrate all these different containers into one solid business process? You have to look at the risk of loss. So once you look at the storage containers, which is what we're talking about, and people do stupid things. It is what it is. People will do things and you'll look at them and go, why would you think of doing that? And they look at you with a blank stare and go, I don't know. I didn't think it was a bad thing to do. And it'll drive you insane, some of the things that people will do, but you have to have mechanisms in place to forecast people's ignorance of the network. All right. Now, I'm not trying to downplay people, but you have to understand people are going to be your greatest threat on that network, just because some of them are going to be educated, some of them just aren't going to know what they're doing. Backup, 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 backup. That's the biggest thing. You can lose a hard drive, you can lose thumb drive, you can lose CDs, but if the data on there is backed up somewhere centrally, you can restore, you can recover. I remember we lost basically our entire customer information system, our CIS system, and I went to our IT guy and I said, "Where's the that's really horrible. Let's get the backup up, and we'll probably be back a couple of days, but at least we'll be close." And he said, absolutely. And about 10, 15 minutes later, he comes back and he looked green and he says, when we switched servers over, I forgot to implement the backups. So yeah, I don't have any backups. And I was furious at first, but we went back and we did some forensics on the drives. It took us a much longer time. We were there for almost 14 hours. But we eventually got everything back up. We had to rebuild all our SQL tables manually. We had to do a lot of work. We got it back up. And he left at the end of the day, definitely understanding that he was going to implement a strategic backup strategy that was fail-safe next time, one where it wasn't just him, but other people checked his work. Wireless networks. You throw a wireless network up, great, everybody gets on it, but how are you preventing that from leaking outside of the borders of your company? If I'm traveling and I want to use free Wi-Fi, I go to Holiday Inn, Denny's, or Starbucks because I can get on any of their networks without any authentication. Use some type of authentication. If you're in a company environment, don't become that company that has their stuff sitting on the web and you've got this Wi-Fi, you've secured your network really well, and then you have this Wi-Fi access point that is just blasting out all your back-end information because you haven't secured it. Watch people putting in Wi-Fi devices. People will mount a device inside of your network that you don't know about. You need to have some type of scanner, and you need to constantly go around and make sure that you don't have rogue Wi-Fi access points that have been set up by people. And it's a classic example of somebody that is told they can't do something. The workaround is to throw a router or throw a Wi-Fi access point in there and then connect up to that, which disables your network protection, allows me to get to work. So you have to look for that. And when you find that rogue access point, just don't rip it out and go, okay, now we got it and we're going to take this away from you. Find out why they put it in. Find out what it is they can't get to that required them to put in that Wi-Fi rogue access point so that you can understand what it is you may or may not be providing your network so you can do a better job of providing access to that network. Make sure that you lock down any networks that you have that are wireless. Use your MAC control. That way only certain addresses can get onto the network, especially on sensitive information, HR, things like that. Make sure those are segmented away from everybody else on the network. And whatever you do, if you have wireless in that environment, you have to turn it, you have to really work hard to make sure you do not have leaks where that wireless security can, or that wireless network can be seen outside of where you want it to be seen. We've used the word firewall a couple times. Basically, all a firewall is, it's something that sits on the network between you and the world. And it makes sure that bad things don't happen to your network. It provides packet filtering, stateful inspection. It stops people from attacking directly your computers by putting a device between them and your system. So the firewall is a device. It's something that it's set between you and the world to keep your people safe. Now, the limitation is it doesn't protect you from people that are on the inside. So if you got someone on the inside doing bad things, you can have all the firewalls you want. You're not going to stop the data from being sent out if you have someone that's stealing from the inside. So again, insider threat will mitigate that firewall. Firewalls have to be managed. I know a couple of friends of mine, they were IT guys, they set up a firewall. It's perfect. Nothing could get through, and then they forgot about it. They didn't come back and check the firewall, and they were attacked. And they were attacked by a zero-day virus. In other words, a virus that no one knew anything about until it actually happened. The company didn't know about the flaw. It was identified by hackers, and they used that to get through. It's a 0-day. No one knows anything about it. 0-day, you can't protect against. But if they had set their firewall up and backed it up and put in the latest additions of the firewall, they would not have had the hacks that they did. So, just by putting in a firewall doesn't mean you can fire and forget and you don't have to worry about it. You have to manage that firewall and make sure that people have the permissions to get through that firewall that they need so they can do their job. Again, anytime you take something away from somebody and they can't do their job, they're going to figure out a way of doing their job around your back. So you got to work with people on your network. You got to work with that team. And there may be times where you might have to go to upper management and say, this is really a stupid idea. And upper management might say, yep, you're right, but we got to do it because we need the business. Do the best you can to secure it. And document. So encryption. Encryption is a method of taking data and applying an algorithm to it, jumbling it all up, throwing it onto a network, taking it off the network, running it through the algorithm, unjumbling it, and then seeing the information. Encryption is a way of creating a message that no one else can read outside of the network, and you must have the authentication on the other side to be able to read the data that's being sent. There is very little, depending on how much time you have, just about any encryption can be broken over time. It's a mathematical formula. It's just an algorithm that's eventually going to be found and cracked, and someone's going to be able to read the data. It just takes time. And if someone is trying to get into your email and they have 10 or 15 years to waste running scripts against those emails, absolutely. They will eventually break your authentication. If you have good, strong authentication, it's going to cause time. And that's what you want. You want time. Because by the time they get to that, the data is probably not going to be useful or useless to the person that actually has that data. You have a public key and you have a private key as a part of this encryption package. The public key is paired. It's mathematically related in such a way that no other value could be substituted. When a message is encrypted with the key, the public key is registered with the authority, and once the document is received, the public key working with the private key unlocks the message, and you now have a document. If I don't have the public key, or something happens to the private key, then the message will stay encrypted. So it gives you some authenticity and some integrity, as we were just talking about on the slide before, of the communication going back and forth across your network. If you want to take a really good class on this subject, especially with the public key, private key, and really get into the deep understanding of encryption, I would tell you take Professor Hosmer's class on data hiding. You will have a phenomenal introduction to encryption. He does a great job. Digital signatures, these are basically hash values that are made of a document, and if the hash values don't match, then the document has been altered. So in forensics, we use digital signatures to ensure the validity and integrity of evidence we collect. So I'll take a file and I'll run a hashing algorithm or value against it. It will then hash that document, produce a 26-digit alphanumeric number that's so unique that it just can't be reproduced with any other tool. So if I run that on that file, I get that number, and I run it again, I get that number again. I can tell you that that file has not been changed. If I run that number on the file a second time, and I get a different number than the first number, then I have an argument to you that the file has been changed and something has been altered in that document, and we need to find out why that document was altered. Okay, and that's in the digital forensics. You can use the same thing when you're hashing and validating important corporate files. There may be times where you need integrity of a corporate file to prove or disprove a claim, maybe insurance or something such as that, and you have to have a clear understanding of how that file was protected. And hashing will give you a signature that you can use. You can also use hashes to find things. So let's say someone does steal some documents from you and you have their thumb drive. Well, you could run a hash value set from your internal document storage against the thumb drive or medium that they were trying to exit with, and you can match up documents that clearly belong to the company, which could then be used in the prosecution against the suspect. When the hash value is calculated, it's encrypted. The hash value then becomes what's known as a private key. It can be a part of the private key depending on the algorithm structure you have. I know of several mail algorithms where they'll take the hash and then that's rehashed or calculated within an algorithm to create yet another key. Okay, or you may have something called a salted hash, where I have a hash that is used to undo a hash, which then gets me into the document. So I have a multi-layer signature file. Okay. The sender's public key is known and it's associated to that private key, and that then can be used to decrypt the message. Now, if the public key is shared outside of the network or shared with other people, or someone gets that public key, well, then you can expect someone to be able to open up that document. That's just how it works. There's a program called PGP, Pretty Good Privacy. It's an open source packaging for email. You can put PGP on your email. Secure web pages, HTTPS in the URL line for online checkouts will give you a hypertext or hypertext protocol secure environment. So now you have encrypted messaging going back and forth between you and the website. So your credit cards are not going out in plain text. At least they shouldn't be going out in plain text. And then you have IPsec, which utilizes cryptography to reduce threats to authenticity. And IPsec is used in a lot of different applications. There are file systems that you can apply encryption to natively. The BitTorrent, which you looked at in the tour, allows you to create a encrypted file structure, which is it breaks up the files and then sends them out in chunks. So even if you got one piece of the message, you wouldn't know what the message is because it has to have the rest of the pieces to be able to assemble that. And BitTorrent was used in the transfer of music and video files and other things back in the day. Windows comes with native encryption. You can turn that on your Windows system, and you can encrypt your hard drive. It'll give you a key. You lose your key, lose that firmware, a signature identifier. Well, your disk is going to stay encrypted. All right, so that's why they produce a key that you put on a some type of medium, and you store that separately away from the network. Password discipline. You guys have all heard the stories. Password is password. I write down all my passwords and put them on my keyboard. People do that because they just don't want to try and remember 16 to 26 digit alphanumeric, uppercase, lowercase passwords because they're difficult. People don't understand, as much as we like to think it, people don't understand passphrases. So when you tell someone you can use a passphrase, so instead of coming up with just a single word, you can actually use a passphrase with uppercase and lowercase and numbers, etc. But people look at you like you're a Martian sometimes when you tell them about passphrases. Training is where this is really going to help you out. If you are enforcing a strong password discipline, which you should, you have to incorporate training with that. You have to teach people how to use systems with those types of passwords. You have to teach them how to remember those systems, mechanisms of how you use those systems. You may also want to have password keepers, some type of simpler files or simpler encryption that allows me to keep multiple passwords in one location. A lot of people frown upon that and they're like, oh, that's crazy, you can't do that. But I will tell you, the older the generation of users you have on your network, the more useful that tool becomes, because that prevents them from writing the stuff down on their blotters on their desk. Or I know I was just telling you, I was at a company recently and they had a large theft, and I was looking at the computer and I said, you have an Excel spreadsheet here that says passwords. And when I opened it up, there were passwords assigned to usernames. Please tell me that that's not the username. And the guy said, oh, no, that is, because people forget their passwords all the time. They call me and I just give them their password. Okay, so, this is the security guy. And he didn't see anything wrong with that because he was an older guy and he didn't see the threat of him possessing all of the passwords for the system. Okay, we had a long talk and eventually he understood what we were talking about, and we changed a lot of mechanisms on their network to secure their network. But getting him to understand that required training. And password discipline, it's all about training. It's all about not using dictionary words. It's all about using randomness in your passwords. And that's what's going to give you that secure password. Okay. But again, if you make passwords so hard, people will find ways around it. It's human nature. And I think I've said this 3 or 4 times during this. Once you make someone have to work really hard to access something, they're not either going to access it, 1, or 2, they're going to go around you. And I'll give you one last little snippet on making things so difficult. So our HTCI, the company I own, we subcontract for a company, a larger company. I'll just leave it at that. They've incorporated a SharePoint site for the transmission of documents back and forth, which is great. They put two-factor authentication on it, so you have to have the Google Authenticator and you have to have their key that's created on their site. And then they created this very long password that that also went on top of this. Their structure fails more than it works. So it became such a point that we just said, we're not going to waste our time trying to log into that system. And we started working directly with the program manager and just sending files back and forth directly to the program manager instead of putting them into this very secure SharePoint system, because it was so secure that we couldn't get into the system. So there was no point. And we had time sensitive documents that we had to send and share for travel and security and things such as that. So again, if you make things so tough and so secure that no one can get into it. No one's going to get into it, and they're just going to go around you. Security vendors. There's lots and lots of security vendors out there. RSA Secure ID, Kerberos, Symantec, Kaspersky. There are tons of vendors. Choose your vendor wisely. If you are researching security, don't listen to the vendors. Talk to other security professionals in your industry that have no interest in the company you're talking to, because every company you talk to has the greatest solution, the most security, the most users, and the greatest and no loss of data that's been reported. And that's really what it comes down to. So you have all these vendors out there vying for your business, and they're all going to tell you what it is they're looking at, what it is they want you to hear. Make sure that you research very well the package that you're going to implement, and make sure it fits your company makeup. Make sure it fits your corporate culture, because remember, people are going to be the ones that have to implement all these security measures. And if you have tools that don't allow them to open up PDFs, for example, well, that's great until you get an email from somebody who wants to buy $1 million worth of products, and they send you a PDF purchase order, and you can't open it, see it, or get it. And that's when the company is going to say, oh, dismantle the whole thing because we can't lose $1 million. Be wary of new technologies, digital fingerprint, retinal ID, voice recognition. These are all great. I'll give you one example of digital fingerprint, which was perfect. It worked great until you got dirt on your finger or water on your finger. So guys would go to the bathroom and they'd wash their hands. They come back from the bathroom, they try to log in to the fingerprint reader, and they would hit that button and nothing would happen because there was water, and the fingerprint reader they had on this system didn't recognize the fingerprint when there was water present, dirt present, sweat present. Make sure you buy a technology that fits your environment as well. Retinal identification is great. If you have people that are not impaired in any way, if you have people that trust retinal identification, are not afraid of it because they've seen too many Mission Impossible movies. And then voice recognition. Voice recognition is great until you get a cold. Or other things that change your vocal octave so much that it's no longer recognized. And if that happens, and if that's your only primary means of getting into something, well, then you've got an issue. Always have backups. If you are to use these types of technologies, have some backup. Have some way of getting into the system that doesn't rely on those key things, because those things, as good as they are, they do fail. There's a organization, and they have a clean room. It's accessed by 3 people. Those 3 people have chips in their fingertip, and it's a physical chip. It's an RFID tracking chip, basically. And when they walk in, they grab the handle of the door. If they have that chip in their hand and it's recognized to the RFID signature and it matches all the identifiers, the door opens. If you don't have that chip, it's not going to open. It's a great system, super expensive, but what have we just done to our employee, our people? We've just intrusively installed a surgically implanted device, and I'm not sure how many of your people are going to want to do that. And then what happens when you fire them? You know, they're going to have to go to the doctor. You're about to fire someone. You're like, hey, you need to go see the doctor. Oh, I'm getting fired? Well, no, we're just going to remove your finger because we have to keep your finger because it has a piece of equipment we need. I mean, that's really kind of where we're going. So just be careful on those kinds of things. If you're going to have an intrusive mechanism in place, if you're going to have something that is biological, just understand biology changes and it's fragile. If I lose my finger in an accident, I can't access my files anymore. Things such as that need to be taken into consideration. Home users. So you have cyber attacks on the home user. You have Trojans. You have bots. You have fake Facebook. And the home computer is where people are going to be attacked the greatest. With that being said, they're also going to drag all of that junk to the corporation on disks and media or shared network drives that you may or may not know about. You have to take into consideration the home user when you're building out your plan. You need to look into how your home users also use their systems. Do you have a lot of remote access people? Do you have people that go home to work on a drive because they just can't do it at work? I'll give you a really good example. In Iraq, the secure system was so poor, it was so slow and so bad, and when people tried to upload documents, secure documents, classified documents, from one point to another point, they couldn't do it. So what did they resort to? Well, they went to their barracks, they logged into Hotmail, and they transferred documents in Hotmail. Classified documents. True story. Because the system was so bad that no one could make it work. Again, back to the old, what I've been preaching here. If you make it so tough and your information insurance plan does not recognize people, they're going to go around you. They're going to figure some other way of making it work where you are not a problem anymore. And when you talk about home users, it's not a bad thing to offer solutions for the home user. So if you have a company, and you want to provide antivirus to everybody, that's not a bad thing. The more secure their homes are, the more secure your corporate network is going to be. All right. Make sure people are trained. Training it's not that expensive. You can train people yourself, and you need to have a proper training regimen and schedule to make sure people know what's going on. Make sure they have do a newsletter, do a bulletin board at the entrance, like a lot of people do, and have on there, these are what's going on. Hey, there's an update for Windows. Update your personal computers. Update your home computers. Offer services for people that are having problems with their home computers. If it's limited services for people to have home computers to help them work through issues. That also helps out quite a bit. Early attacks usually conducted from public libraries and universities and campuses. The objective was to access information from banks and government and military systems. They basically look for weaknesses on your perimeter. It wasn't really that sophisticated. Today, the attacks are getting much more complex. Security is a key part of the protection of the company. It's as important as any other mechanism. Physical security, financial security, network security is right up there now. The computer is a part of everybody's world, and the new use of social engineering, the new use of social media is only making it harder on security departments because people are doing crazy things with their computer because they saw something online. Again, training. Train your people to protect themselves. That's the way you're really going to secure and keep people out of trouble. You can have all the firewalls, all the intrusion, all the detectors you want. But again, if you're not training people to protect the corporation, all of that is going to fail. It just is what it is. So in our new century, we have people that are specializing in attacks. Attacks are a part of a multi-vectored attack. It might be physical, criminal, it may be social, it may be ideological. You may have many different things built into one single attack. They're not coming at your network unprepared. They're gonna look at your firewalls. They're gonna look at they're gonna scan your system. They're gonna know your weaknesses before they ever hit you. And you've got to be ready and you've got to be prepared for that. They're going to put malware on your system layers. The latest report out says that malware is on the decline, and that social media and infecting people on the network is growing. So that's something that we really need to be concerned with. Making sure that people aren't reading the fake news, making sure that people aren't seeing fake social media, politicized social media. Make sure that your corporation is not becoming ideologic because of false narratives that are being spun on the web. Be a myth buster. Go in there and break the myths. Be that person that sits everybody down and says, hey, this is what's going on. This is the truth of what this attack is, or this is what is a true read of what our company did. Be that myth buster. Break down those walls and those barriers that are being put up by folks that want to cause your organization harm. All right. So again, information assurance, information security, infrastructure protection. These are all hand in hand. These are governance policies. These are governance of the network, governance of the people. And again, people, process, technology. The three core: people, process, technology. You need to protect the people and train the people, work with the people. You need to have solid processes, and you need to understand all of the processes. If you don't understand the processes, you can't build an IT plan. And then technology. What are you going to implement? How are you going to implement it? And how are you going to protect what you have in place? Okay. So with that, I'm going to close this out, and I will see you in the next slide set.